last motif we have to make is the Orb and Sceptre, and the techniques for this are very similar to the crown, and the decoration on this is done in exactly the same way. So once I've showed you how to make your Orb and Sceptre shapes, you can just decorate those using exactly the same techniques as we used on the crown. Joining is also the same, so I'm going to leave long tails, and this is what you're going to use to attach your Orb and Sceptre to the blanket. So we're going to make the orb now, and I've started with a slip knot on my hook. I'm going to chain 3 and make a ring, and I'm going to make 12 treble crochet into that center ring. So I'm going to start with a chain 2, and that counts as my first treble crochet, and then 11 more into the center. I'm crocheting over my tail as we did for the centers of the granny squares. So that's 2, 3, 4, oops, popped off the hook. And that's 11 and 12, and I'm just going to slip stitch into the 2 loops at the top of the first treble. And now I'm going to make 2 double crochet in each stitch around, so there will be 24 double crochet in total. So I'm going to start by chaining 1, and that doesn't count as a stitch. So 1, 2 in the first stitch, and 2 in the next stitch, and so on until you have 24 double crochet. That's 21, 22, 2 more in the last stitch, 23, 24, and then slip stitch with your hook under the 2 loops of the first double crochet. And the next round is double crochet again, but this time we're going to work into the back loop only, and this gives us a defined ring of stitches around the edge. And I'm going to make 1 double crochet into each stitch around, but part way round we're going to make the cross, and this is done in the same way as we did on the crown. So I'm going to start by chaining 1, and this doesn't count as a stitch, so 1 double crochet into the same stitch, and I'm going to double crochet 12 stitches. So that's 1, 2, 3. So that's my 12 double crochet, and I'm now going to make my cross, and I'm going to do that in the same way as I did for the crown. So I'm going to chain 6, I'm going to skip 2 stitches, so 1, 2, and 2 double crochet into the next 2 stitches, and then I'm going to chain 4, skip 2 stitches, and double crochet in the next 2 stitches, and then chain 4 again, skip 2 stitches, 2 double crochet into the next 2 stitches, and then come back down to your original starting chain of 6 and double crochet into those first 2 stitches. So 1 and 2. So there's your cross, and I'm now going to continue with my double crochet all the way around the rest of my orb. So remembering to work in the back loops only, and just 1 double crochet in each stitch until you get back to where you started. And that's my last stitch, and fasten off in the usual way, hook under both loops with my first double crochet, and fasten off, and there is my orb with the little cross on top. So I'm starting with a chain again. This is a nice quick easy one, and I'm leaving a long tail again for sewing. So I've got my long tail of yarn, and this time I'm going to chain 12, and then I'm just going to skip the first stitch and double crochet in each stitch along the chain. So that's 11 double crochet, and then chain 1, and as always that doesn't count as a stitch, so I'm just going to come back along my stitches with 1 more row of double crochet. And that's my last stitch, and I'm going to fasten off, and again I'm going to leave a long tail, so we have a long tail on each side of the band for sewing in, and then the band sits across the middle of the orb in a curve like this, so it gives it its nice spherical shape. So the last piece to make is the sceptre, and again this starts with a slip knot and a chain 3, 2, 3, and we're going to make that into a ring. And this time I'm going to chain 4 double crochet into the ring. We're making a really small donut shape of stitches that forms the ball at the end of the sceptre. So I'm going to 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches into that ring, and that gives me my little bobble shape for the end. And I'm now going to chain 14 to give me the length of the sceptre. So that's 14. And the end of the sceptre is worked in a very similar way to the cross, but it's not a cross with square ends, it has pointed ends. So this time we are going to skip 1 stitch instead of 2, and then make 2 double crochet into the chain, and then we're going to make the next point of the sceptre. So this time we're going to chain 3, so 1, 2, 3, and we're going to skip 1 stitch instead of 2 as we did for the cross, and make 2 double crochet into our chains, and then same again, chain 3, skip 1 stitch, 2 double crochet, and then in the same way as we did for the cross, bring your points back down to the first chain below where you started the points for the end of the sceptre. And then I'm just going to double crochet in each stitch until we reach our little starting bobble. So just working down the chain. Last few stitches. And one more. And the very last stitch is a slip stitch into that first double crochet, so under both loops. Oh, that was a good squeak. And pull through. And I'm going to leave a nice long tail, and that's what I'm going to use to sew the sceptre onto my blanket. So I'm just going to pull that through. And there is my sceptre, and I've got my little pointed ends instead of my little square ends like I had on the cross. So the last stage is to add your decoration to your orb and sceptre, and I've added white stitches in the same way as I did on the crown, and I have these along the length of the sceptre and at the end, and I have them over the top half of the orb and in the cross at the top, because that's what the orb is like. It's not decorated at the bottom, this is just plain gold. All of the jewels are at the top, and then I've added little jewels across the band in the middle, and we have a little ruby and a diamond at the top, and these are done in exactly the same way as we did on the crown. And the very last step is to sew them onto your blanket, and you're going to use exactly the same technique as you did for the crown. So it's a good idea to pin them into position first. And once you've pinned them down and you're happy with where they are, you're going to use this long tail to sew all the way around your sceptre, remembering to only pick up the stitches on the top side of the blanket so they don't show through behind. And then at the points of the sceptre, instead of pulling out 2 skipped stitches to make the square ends, we're just going to pick up the 1 skipped stitch, and that gives us little pointed ends on our sceptre. And then the orb, that's sewn down in exactly the same way as the crown, and I used the long tails on the central band to sew all the way around the edge. So thread onto your needle and start sewing round, cross in the same way as we did on the crown, and then round here, and you'll probably, if like me you didn't leave a huge amount of yarn, find you can pick up the other tail and carry on around the bottom edge until your orb is joined all the way round. And this is what your orb and sceptre will look like when you finish joining them.